going to try to keep this short and sweet because it's Saturn. We want to keep things nice and condensed. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys a little diagram that I've created for myself and for us. We can see here the Pisces house lords. Saturn rules the 11th and 12th houses for a Pisces, because Capricorn is the 11th sign from Pisces and Aquarius is the 12th house. So these are the themes that Saturn is going to relate to for a Pisces. This diagram comes from Ryan Kirksack's apprenticeship program. We can see that what we're reading here is the scripture of Brihat Parashara Horashastra, as it explains the nature of the house lords as relates to the Lagna, Pisces. What we read about Saturn are two particular points to take from this. We learn that Saturn is one of the evil lords for Pisces. Evil meaning hard to deal with, and it's like a necessary evil. And Saturn is also, along with Mercury, is stated as a Marika. Now, the 11th and 12th Lord is not usually a Marika, but Pisces has to take on Saturn as not only as the evilest house, the 11th Lord, but it is also given Marika qualities, which is unusual for the 11th or the 12th Lord. So, Saturn is particularly damaging and painful for a Pisces to deal with. Of course, there's two things to understand about this. Number one, if your Saturn is well placed in Libra or close to Libra, especially close to Libra or Virgo, because Saturn gains Digbala, or directional strength, by being close to the 7th house. If your Saturn is there, then you might be you still have to deal with Saturn and what it's all about, just like everybody does. But you might be much more, it might cause much less darkness to the light that all your other planets give. And a well-placed Saturn can really clean up a lot of the gross junk which Pisces is known to take upon itself on its journey to self-realization and the fullest expression of its talent. Every sign, every rising sign, has darkness from the light of the good, auspicious planets that it gives. Having a well-placed Saturn negates the darkness that's caused by the light, shall we say. Still going to be darkness, though, but there won't be as much of it. So, there are a few confluent factors relating to Saturn, time, and the end of things for a Pisces ascendant. The end of things, death, the sculpting hand of death and of pain and of misery, these might be constant subliminal pressures which move a Pisces ever precipitously forward, because Saturn rules the 12th house. Now, this is something that's in the subconscious. The 12th house of a Pisces is these Saturn themes. And when it's well placed, a good Saturn for a Pisces can give a mature and even a divine capacity to deal patiently with time, with human and biological limitations and deficits and pains. It gives it the capacity and strength to deal with death and with mysticism, although it will always still carry the negative tones of Saturn, of father death, of father time. So this is part of the reason why Pisces often find themselves dealing with either the dying or with people with mental or physical illnesses. They love to serve silently and quietly and humbly with these themes. Pisces can make good doctors and healers. Saturn distinctly rules the end of life for Pisces, being lord of the last houses, the 11th and 12th. And Saturn is already, again, the slow-moving father of death for everyone. So this confluence of themes is good when it's good, if Saturn is close to Libra, the 7th house, and is not affected by malefic planets or evil house lords. But if Saturn for a Pisces is ill-placed or associated with malefic lords, it causes some real ugly problems. especially if it is close to the first house and close to Aries. The reason is because this is one of those planet combinations that are black and white. The exaltation point, the debilitation point, Aries. Saturn is debilitated in Aries. And Aries is right next door to the first house, where Saturn loses Digbala strength. Anytime Saturn is close to the first house, the person is crippled in a negative way by Saturn's harsh expectations, by Saturn's debilitating criticism and difficulty. Everyone has it. Saturn is the pains that in everyone's chart. It's the shadow in everyone's chart that everybody has to deal with. And if that is close to your identity, your first house, then it's causing more pain than good. I'm going to talk about Saturn a little bit to delineate this a bit, but I want to say that the 11th house happens to be the most evil of the house lords. The 11th house paints the 12th house. Because Saturn rules the 11th and the 12th, Saturn paints the 12th house black. So this means that the 12th house for a Pisces, the subconscious contemplation, will always have this dragging element to it, So let's talk a little bit about that. The 11th house is a house of ego, gains, of kama, of desire. Pisces may secretly desire to express Saturn because Saturn rules the 11th house. The 11th house is like the most evil lord because it's so deliciously wanting to the soul that it's like egoic. It's a desire of the ego to have gains. And we know from the Bhagavad Gita, as the Bhagavad Gita says, we're not entitled to the rewards for our actions, only the actions themselves. The 11th house is difficult for everybody because we desire to get whatever the themes related to it is. Now, Pisces deeply desires to have structure, of the structure of Saturn, to think critically. It wants that structure in a subconscious, unconscious way. And it doesn't want to have to deal with the structure thing. So Pisces often ignores Saturn, especially because it's wrapped up in the 12th house. It's in the subliminal unconscious, and it doesn't want to deal with it. Now, the thing is that it's going to have to. And if Saturn is close to the first house or the second house, this desire for egoic gains and recognition is going to drive them to criticize themselves to death, especially because it's a marika. That might be literally true. They will criticize themselves in order to get these gains. The 11th house, the feeling that others recognize them for their sense of stability and structure. They want to be known for being able to hold their emotions comfortably. They hate being gross. But if Saturn is close to Aries, they will. They will express it. If Saturn is in Pisces especially, it's in the first house, and this 11th and 12th Lord energy comes through the first house and cripples them. Yeah, the very identity. And they just go into this whole complex of like, oh, I've never been good enough for myself. And everybody can tell them that they're great, and they'll still just draw out this blah, depressive energy. Saturn is debilitated in Aries. That's an important thing to think about in this regard. We'll put it this way. Saturn is debilitated in Aries. And Aries is the second house for a Pisces. So this is a double confluence because it's black and white with Saturn for Pisces. If you're in Aries or if you're Pisces or even Taurus, you're still very close to the first house. And this is mitigated a bit if Saturn is in Aquarius or if Saturn is in Capricorn because it's in its own signs. If Saturn is debilitated and close to Aries and the first house, Saturn cannot find the structure that it wants because it's looking in its own limited window. It dedicates itself to finding structure by its own entrepreneurial means, by trying to gain the prestige that it wants through its own checks. So it has this 11th house egoic desire to look stable to other people. And how does it try to do that? Through its own measures, if it's close to Aries. So the Pisces will be subconsciously inclined to enact its own sense of the structure and stability. And in Aries, you're not dealing with other people. You're not dealing with structure. You're just dealing with the uninhibited wellspring of your own inspiration and willpower to enact. And when Saturn is trying to, it's just like a hole in a bucket with Saturn and Aries. You're just going to try to gain your own structure through Artha, through the second house is an Artha house, and it's earth and it's financial stability. And that's not where a Pisces best gains structure, particularly for the Aries factor. Where Pisces gains its structure best, and in a slow mercurial way. It will always be slow because it's Saturn. But the 11th house will come to deeply support the Pisces' psychology when Saturn is closer to the 7th house and when it's closer to Libra. The reason is because the sign of Libra gives the structure of other people. When the egoic desire to feel stable is reinforced by other people's memory of what the Pisces has done, or other people being involved in Pisces' work. This is the 7th house emphasis, and also the 8th house emphasis. The Saturn of a Pisces just deeply desires to be with other people, because other people will refer to their progress. And then they can tell the Pisces, remember how you were 5 years ago? You're not like that anymore. Look at how much you've developed because we did that. Do you remember when we did this thing and that helped you? You know, Saturn always does well with the harmony and balance seeking Libra, because other people and Libra and law, Pisces can figure out the law that it needs to live by, and it can control itself by the constant refurbishing of these universal laws and mutual giving to people by dealing with other people, by dealing in groups. The 11th and 12th house of a Pisces, the subconscious psyche of Pisces, does better when it is held together by other people's constant reaffirmation and by business contracts, by things outside of itself. The group consciousness that the Saturn, when it's closer to Libra or Virgo, or Scorpio is not a great place for Saturn, but even Scorpio is in the 9th house for a Pisces rising. Same thing with the Leo, it's the 6th house, which does well for Saturn, but it's Leo's, not great for Saturn, but it's still close to the 7th house cusp. These kinds of places, people will tell the Pisces that you're still lovable, you're still worth it, and we remember all the work that you've put in, and it's a constant grounding for the Pisces' sense of the stability and structure. Pisces' egoic energy, this 11th house energy, is pacified when others are doing well, and when the Pisces is involved in groups that are doing well, because then the Pisces' mind isn't wrapped up in its own hateful self-criticism. And this will ultimately help to deeply pacify the Pisces. So, if you're a Pisces, keep in mind that your subliminal unconscious and your desire to be respected by people and to have gains and to do well will not be pacified early in your life. And even if it is, if you get rich and you have lots of money you won't be happy with it unless you dedicate yourself to serving a group which appreciates the effort that you put in. If you don't find that, you're going to try to do it yourself, and you're going to criticize yourself for wasting effort, because that's what the 11th house energy is. It's an end game. Even Saturn, well, Saturn here is not going to get the feeling of 11th house pacification. It's the Pisces ego will never be pacified until they have spent like 20 or 30 years plus. You know, like Saturn's return takes about 27 years. The Pisces rising won't really feel satisfied until they've put about that much time into a group, and the group tells them that they did dedicate them and that they were good and that they were worth it. And it's only in that end game that Pisces begins to let go of this frustrating energy that Saturn can cause for the subconscious and for the ego's desire to have gains. Look more to pacify your ego, not for reward. You can't get an instant reward for your desire to be well respected. You won't get it. You will have to dedicate yourself to something. And if your Saturn is in Aries or it's in Pisces, you might not be inclined to do that. But remember that Saturn is still important. It's an important structure, and you will do better by giving yourself less criticism. Don't identify so succinctly with your harsh subconscious. Let go of it through serving others, and you'll have a much easier time dealing with it. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series.